Does the minimum wage meet PPP, and does it even matter? The minimum wage was introduced at the tail end of the 20th century, at the tail end of the industrial era, at the tail end of a cultural revamp. However, it was the start of workers' rights and the important international conversation we are having about pay, what people should be paid, and the morality of it all. In this video, I will explore the minimum wage and purchasing power parity, PPP, the historical significance of the minimum wage, and the studies related to it, as well as the overarching social media sentiment and the need for it to be increased. Before I start, I must first define what the minimum wage is. The minimum wage is the lowest amount a business can pay its employees and the lowest amount an employee can sell his or her services. The movement for a minimum wage was initially to reduce the unfair leverage employers had to exploit the workers in their sweatshops. This unfair advantage allowed the employers to have nearly all of the wage-setting power, leading to the exploitation of the employees. This unfair leverage leads to monopsony, a term that will be used for the rest of the video. Monopsony is an economical term that refers to the market situation where there is only one buyer, and so that one buyer can control the market as they please. In this case, that one buyer is the employer, who has nearly all of the wage-setting power. The government established minimum wage to help regulate the wage-setting power of employers, so that worse ones wouldn't undercut the competition by paying their employees next to nothing, a practice that was happening at the time and still does happen in jobs and countries not protected by the minimum wage. However, the roots of the minimum wage are much older, and actually trace back to the maximum wage enacted by King Edward III on labourers in medieval England. He enacted this maximum wage because the Black Plague caused the demand for the services of the serfs to rise, but their supply to be reduced, and as most of them died. Thus, as per basic economical supply and demand models, I say basic, the serf rates started to increase to make them quite rich. As you can see, the link between basic economical models and the wage regulation has always been at odds with each other, something that will play as a theme in the rest of the video. Anyways, time moves on, the maximum wage is abandoned, and we reach the 19th century, where tradesmen and ship of the serfs is less needed, and factories can produce things faster, cheaper, and more quickly than the cost of an employee. The relationship is switched, and the employer is constantly being undercut. The relationship is switched, and the employee is constantly being undercut, and so yet again the government body steps in to regulate. This time, a minimum wage is enacted, and trade unions are decriminalized, and Winston Churchill introduced the Trade Boards Act in 1909. As you have already gathered, the supply and demand model is often used as a reaction to why the minimum wage is counterproductive. This is because a supply and demand model, when a minimum wage is implemented, shows that the lowest skilled workers or the least productive workers would be priced out, and the competition between the workers with adequate skills would increase over time, as a high price means less demand with a large supply, leading to increased competition, leading to an increase in unemployment rate due to the layoffs and a lack of available jobs, which could potentially lead to a recession. Also, hypothetically, if a company was committed to keeping the same demand it had for the workers post-minimum wage as it did pre-minimum wage, it would mean to stay profitable, it will either have to cut costs elsewhere, leading to perhaps a lower quality product, or an increase in product price, which would cause customers to go elsewhere, substitution effect, causing the company to go out of business in a competitive market. Before I explain why this model just isn't realistic, I must first list out its assumptions. It assumes that no one party can affect the price of the service or product, no restrictions on movement of capital or labor, the employee knows what jobs are available at his wage and the conditions of the job, the employee knows what labor is available at its price point and how productive that labor is, the factors are identical, all employees are of equal skill, there is no limit to the number of workers available, and the model is elastic. Now, here are the criticisms about the model that many economists have said. The first is that the model is logically incoherent, given all the assumptions it makes. The second criticism many economists have with it is that the model is very basic in the factors it takes, making the model ambiguous and unable to determine reliable results. It sees the employers as one standard group and body, and so implies a monopsony due to the internal collusion between employers. It sees a type of market failure. It sees and results in workers being paid less than their marginal value as inevitable. And the model also believes the amount of labor sold would also be lower than the competitive optimal allocation, always, which is wrong. It also assumes that if a company cannot compete, it must lay off workers, and that there's no other way to cut costs to maintain a competitiveness in the market. Using this model in real life also has moral problems, as the model implies labor can be treated like a tool, used up and just can't happen, as it would go directly against labor laws and the rights of workers. Thus, the supply and demand model argument does not work for the cases against the minimum wage. Most people who argue for the minimum wage not being increased often state the negative feedback loop it would bring, where more and more companies will turn to automation. This is a very valid point and is true. For example, Jeff Bezos has increased the minimum wage of his employees to $15 per hour. However, he has also been lobbying for a higher minimum wage since 2018, and has been reported to be heavily automating and laying off workers. However, this is bound to happen. Automation and innovation of technology to make the system of business easier is just good business. Thus, if a higher minimum wage for the short term is a byproduct of this, Thus, if a higher minimum wage for the short term is a byproduct of this, it is an inherently good thing. Moreover, when increasing the minimum wage, many factors are checked, such as inflation, labor supply and demand, wage levels, distribution differentials, employment terms, productivity growth, labor costs, business operating costs, the number and trend of bankruptcies, economical freedom rankings, the standard of living and prevailing average wage rate. This helps to make sure the minimum wage increase is sustainable, and this is in the UK done by the Low Pay Commission. In fact, October of last year, the Low Pay Commission, known as LPC, recommended the government on a new set of rates for the national living wage and the national minimum wage due to the turbulent economical conditions caused by the pandemic and COVID. Here at Norman, we are here to help, and have released a playlist of videos to help you through the COVID process, whether you're an employee or an employer, self-employed or a business owner. If you are in need of accountancy, financial advice, financial planning, or legal advice, just give us a call at 0207 183 1558. That is 027 718 31558. Wait, you've just mentioned the national living wage. What is that, I hear you ask, and why is that different from the national minimum wage? Well, the national living wage is the money/salary that a person needs to meet their basic needs without government assistance. Well, the national living wage is the money or salary a person needs to meet their basic needs without government assistance. The basic needs being food, housing, and other essentials such as clothing. The national living wage is great for increasing the purchasing power of lower income people according to Keynesian economics. Remember, this as a purchasing power is something that will play an important theme in the latter parts of this video. Returning back to my point, that even economists such as Adam Smith has recognized how important. Returning back to my point, economists such as the great Adam Smith have recognized how important having a base wage that is livable was. He quoted in his book, Wealth of Nations, "Servants, laborers, and workmen of different kinds make up the far greater part of every great political society. But what improves the circumstances of the greater part can never be regarded as an inconvenience to the whole. No society can surely be flourishing and happy of which the far greater part of its members are poor and miserable. It is but equity. Besides, that they who feed, clothe, and lodge the whole body of people should have a share of the produce of their own labor, as to be themselves tolerably well fed, clothed, and lodged." Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, page 36. Supporters of the living wage argue the implication is for the greater good of society, and studies by Newmark and Adams, specifically the paper "Do Living Wage Ordinance Reduce Urban Poverty?" state, there is evidence that the living wage ordinances modestly reduce the poverty rates in locations in which these ordinances are enacted. However, there is no evidence that states' minimum wage laws do so. Do living wage ordinances reduce urban poverty? Furthermore, a study carried out in Hamilton, Canada by Zheng and Hong indicated that living wage workers have the higher effective commitment and lower turnover intention. They are also more likely to become tied. They're also more likely to tie themselves to this corporation they work for. Therefore, the employee will become more productive, and the company increases profits through an increased social morale. This fits under the social exchange theory, points that the mutual obligation employers and employees feel to be the mutual obligation, which points out the mutual obligation that employers and employees feel towards each other, and that employees perceive that they are provided favorable treatment. However, like everything, the national living wage has its fair share of criticisms, like how it would be applied in different family units, whether it is focused on the individual or more holistically. Moreover, it means that a good employee who uses it can be usurped by the worst employer, effectively driving the employer out of business. So what would be the point of implementing it without repercussions, right? Because if they can easily be usurped, then why would they do it at all? And if someone who doesn't do it is not punished, then it just makes business sense not to do it. Getting back on point, many also think it is a band-aid to a larger wound, as it provides a limited solution to the actual underlying problems, such as economical inequality, the increase of long-term low-wage jobs, the decline of unions and legal protection from workers. However, the underlying social sentiment in the Western world, using America as our largest example, sees a national living wage more favorably than welfare, as in the words of economist Zagros Majid. The living wage may be seen by the public as preferable to other methods because it reinforces the work ethic and ensures that there is something of value produced, unlike welfare, that is often believed to be a pure cash gift from the public coffers. Zagros Majid Sajjadi, economist at the State of California's Division of Labor and Statistics Research. Okay, we have now covered what the national living wage is. So let's move back onto the main point by the LPC. The LPC has reason to believe that the UK national living wage now stands at £8.21 per hour, or 58.9% of the median hourly earnings in 58.9% of the median hourly earnings in October of 2019, and so we are getting close to the projected figures of 60%. However, it should be noted that the national living wage only covers 7% of workers aged 25, and the coverage varies depending on the size of economical sectors in the region, leading to the next point that the national living wage and minimum wage should regionalize as the variety of UK job markets is very diverse, and so it makes more sense to do it that way. Moreover, it can be more aggressive in our push for a higher minimum wage, as it has been seen that the business can be more malleable to it. If rolled out by region, no one size fits all. Can change to adjust the higher minimum wages. At a certain point, inflation can erode the national living wage in order to prevent the loss of jobs at a higher scale. Currently, the national living wage is up to 2/3 of the median, and may be higher post-2020. And so, here in the UK, there's really no need to mess with the plan to roll out the minimum wage to be higher. As for the questions in the title, if the UK minimum wage meets PPP, well, it does, and even if it did not, it wouldn't matter, because it doesn't change anything.